What's the first thing that comes to your mind when you saw an apple? Is it red? Is it sweet? Is it crisp and juicy? Is it succulent? How about the questions of what is the most beautiful thing to see? What's the most wonderful smell? What's the best taste? What's the greatest sound? Or what is the most wonderful thing to touch? All these questions lie on one common denominator: the human senses. Human senses help us interpret and respond to our internal environment and the world around us. With the help of sensory receptors, we gather, process, and respond to various stimuli. According to some philosophers, our senses are significant for our production of ideas. But now, the question is, can we really rely on our senses?
A Scottish philosopher, David Hume, focused on this problem in his book, An Enquiry Concerning Human Understanding, that was first published in 1748. David Hume was well known for his skepticism and his empiricism, the view that all knowledge is derived from what we perceive through our five senses, which are the sense of vision, hearing, smell, touch, and taste, rather than reasoning and theoretical speculation. By combining these concepts, Hume came to some illuminating conclusions about knowledge, causations, and the self. His ideas stirred up controversy during his life, but proved that to have a long-lasting influence on some philosophers to come.
And now, let's take a better grasp of his book by delving into some of its sections that primarily focus on the production of thoughts, ideas, impressions, and necessary connections. I'm Franz Leon Enriquez together with Rainiel Gala, and this is David Hume's An Enquiry Concerning Human Understanding. Let's first delve into the second section of his book, which is Of the Origins of Ideas. There are considerable differences between the perceptions of the mind. David Hume divided these perceptions into two classes or species, distinguished by the different degrees of force and vivacity, which are thoughts or ideas and impression. Thoughts or ideas are the less forcible and lively perceptions of which individuals are conscious. On the other hand, impressions are the more lively perceptions. These are distinguished from ideas when people reflect on sensations or movements. Impressions are perceptions that the mind experiences with the most force and violence, and ideas are the faint images of impressions. Hume considered this distinction so obvious that he demurred from explaining it at any length. As he indicated in a summary explication in the Treatise of Human Nature, impressions are felt and ideas are thought. Nevertheless, he conceded that sometimes sleep, fever, or madness can produce ideas that approximate to the force of impressions, and some impressions can approach the weakness of ideas. But such occasions are rare. The distinction between impressions and ideas is problematic in a way that Hume did not notice. The impression or experience of anger, for example, is an unmistakable quality and intensity. But the idea of anger is not the same as a weaker experience of anger. Thinking of anger no more guarantees being angry than thinking of happiness guarantees being happy. So, there seems to be a difference between the impression of anger and the idea of anger that Hume's theory does not capture. All perceptions, whether impressions or ideas, can be either simple or complex, whereas simple perceptions are not subject to further separation or distinction. Complex perceptions are. To return to an example mentioned above, the perception of an apple is so complex, insofar as it consists of a combination of simple perceptions of a certain shape, color, texture, and aroma. It is noteworthy that, according to Hume, for every simple impression, there is a simple idea that corresponds to it and differs from it, only in force and vivacity and vice versa. Thus, corresponding to the impression of red is the idea of red. This correlation does not hold true in general for complex perceptions. Although there is a correspondence between the complex impression of an apple and the complex idea of an apple, there is no impression that corresponds to the idea of Pegasus or to the idea of a unicorn. These complex ideas do not have to correlate in reality. Because the formation of every single idea is always preceded by experience of corresponding simple impression, and because the experience of every simple impression is always followed by the formulation of a corresponding simple idea, it follows, according to you, that simple impressions are the causes of their corresponding simple ideas.
Though the thought of man is unbounded, it not only escapes all human power and authority, but is not even restrained within the limits of nature and reality. What never was seen or heard of may yet be conceived, nor is anything beyond the power of thought except what implies an absolute contradiction. For Hume, the human mind can only operate in four ways: compounding, transposing, augmenting, or diminishing materials received from the senses and experiences. He believed that the only true statements we can make about reality are empirical because they are directly based on our perceptions. And he argued that we should be skeptical of general theories since they produce by custom of the mind, meaning habits of thought rather than direct observations. We have no guarantee, after all, that the world will continue to behave in the way it has done in the past. We can get a better grasp of Hume's perspective on human understanding by looking at a child playing with modeling clay. Hume wrote that every thought we have consists of compound of ideas, each directly derived from sense perceptions. It's like a child sticking pieces of clay together. One is shaped like a piece of cheese, two others like slice of bread. Together, they form something that our senses tells us looks like a sandwich. Hume would add that any compound ideas we have about it, that a big sandwich, that clay sandwich does not look good to eat, we are also derived from sense perceptions. The human mind, Hume believed, can transpose one complex idea onto other, generating a new idea that just as one piece of clay can be exchanged from another. Moving on, analyzing thoughts and ideas. In analyzing thoughts and ideas, however compound or sublime, humans always find that they resolve themselves into such simple ideas as were copied from a precedent feeling or sentiment. Every idea which people examine is copied from a similar impression. Hume draws a distinction between impression and thoughts or ideas. Impressions are lively and vivid perceptions, while ideas are drawn from memory or the imagination, and thus less lively and vivid. Impressions comprehend, according to Hume, all our more lively perceptions when we hear, or see, or feel, or love, or hate, or desire, or will. Thus, both the color red, the feeling of anger, are considered impressions. Ideas are what arise when we reflect upon our impressions, so the memory of seeing the color red or a thought about anger are considered ideas.
While we might consider the human mind an unlimited organ, able to conceive of imaginary creatures and far plans with great facility, Hume points out that our imagination in fact consists merely of a complex of ideas. For instance, if we imagine a gold mountain, we are compounding our idea of gold with our idea of mountain. Hume provides two arguments to support this claim. First, he suggests that all complex ideas are compounded out of simple ideas, which in turn derive from simple impressions. For instance, Our idea of God as supremely good and intelligent comes from taking our simple ideas of human goodness and intelligence and augmenting them without limit. According to Hume, the idea of God as a wise and powerful being is in fact nothing other than the augmentation of certain qualities of our own minds, joined together into one new idea. Our minds, he thought, have nothing else from which to form an idea of God, just as our child has nothing but clay to model with. So, although the human mind can mold all sorts of fantastical ideas, Hume states that, ultimately, we are heavily restricted in facts we can think, because these ideas must be based on direct sense impressions. Second, he points out that our imagination is limited to those ideas of which we have had impressions. Thus, a blind man is unable to imagine colors, a deaf man to imagine sounds, or a mild-mannered man to imagine cruelty. Restoring the deficient sense opens an inlet for his sensations, and by opening these sensations, it also opens an inlet of the ideas. As a result, the man will find no difficulty in conceiving these objects. Therefore, the only manner by which an idea can have access to the mind is only through the actual feeling or sensation. Hume's proposition is that all ideas, especially abstract ones, are naturally faint and obscure. The mind has but a slender hold of them. They are apt to be confounded with other resembling ideas, and when we have often employed any term, though without distinct meaning, we are apt to imagine it has a determinate idea annexed to it. On the contrary, all impressions, that is, all sensations, either outward and inward, are strong and vivid. The limits between them are more exactly determined, nor is it easy to fall into any error or mistake with regard to them.
Moving on to the third section of the book, of the association of ideas, it is stated that there is a principle of connection between the different thoughts or ideas of the mind, and that, in their appearance to the memory of imagination, they introduce each other with a certain degree of method and regularity. Because the faculty of imagination can divide and assemble disparate ideas at will, some explanation is needed for the fact that people tend to think in regular and predictable patterns. Hume said that the production of thoughts in the mind is guided by three principles: the resemblance, contiguity, or the time and place, and the cause and effect. Thus, people who think of one idea are likely to think of another idea that resembles it. Their thought is likely to run from red to pink to white, or from dog to wolf to lion. Concerning contiguity, people are inclined to think of are next to each other in space of time. Finally, and most importantly, people tend to create associations between ideas of things that are usually related. The ideas of fire and smoke, teacher and students, parent and child, and disease and death are connected in the mind for that reason. Hume used the principle of resemblance for another purpose, to explain the nature of general ideas. He held that there are no abstract ideas, and he affirmed that all ideas are particular. Some of them, however, function as general ideas that represent many objects of certain kind, because they incline to mind to think of other ideas that they resemble.
Moving on the fourth section of his book, entitled Skeptical Doubts Concerning the Operations of Understanding. According to you, the mind is capable of apprehending two kinds of proposition or truth: those expressing relations of ideas and those expressing matters of fact. First, let's focus on the relations of ideas. It is stated that relations of ideas are every affirmation which is either intuitively or demonstratively asserted. Example: geometry, algebra, and arithmetic. Because the propositions of arithmetic and algebra are exclusively about relations of ideas, according to Hume, those disciplines are more certain than the others. Hume stated that geometry is not quite as certain as arithmetic and algebra because its original principles derive from sensation, and about sensation, there can never be absolute certainty. Propositions of the relations of ideas are discoverable by mere operation of thought, without dependence on what is existent in the universe. Delving into the matters of fact, matter of fact never implies contradiction and is conceived by the mind with the same facility and distinctness, as if ever so conformable to reality. Unlike propositions about relations of ideas, propositions about matters of fact are known only through experience. By far, the most important of such propositions are those that express or presuppose causal relations. For example, the sun will rise tomorrow, and fire causes heat. Propositions about matters of fact are only known through experience. By far, the most important of such propositions are those that express or presuppose causal relations.
Moving forward to the causal relations. All reasoning concerning matter of fact seems to be founded on cause and effect relations. By means of causal relations, humans can go beyond the evidence of one's memory and senses. According to Hume's proposition, causes and effects are discoverable not by reason, but by experience. For an example, when a child has felt the sensation of pain from touching the flame of a candle, she will be careful not to put her hand near any candle, but will expect a similar effect from a cause which is similar in its sensible qualities and appearance. Humans need to see a process recur many times before they can begin to see two events in the process as causally connected. As for the reasoning, all reasonings may be divided into two kinds: the demonstrative reasoning and the moral reasoning. Firstly, the demonstrative reasoning, a type of reasoning that concerns the relation of ideas, and the moral reasoning is a type of reasoning that concerns matter of fact and existence. According to Hume, all the abstract reasonings in this world could never lead us one step towards the knowledge of it. Therefore, all reasonings from experience ultimately falls back upon simple impressions.
Let's now delve into the fifth section of his book, which is entitled Skeptical Solutions of These Doubts. David Hume presented his own positive picture of the skeptical attitude by showing that skepticism goes beyond mere doubts to offer a skeptical solution. He divided it into three parts. First is nature. Hume professed that nature will always maintain her rights and prevail at the end over any abstract reasoning whatsoever. Nature always wins out against abstract reasoning. However, he does claim to have shown that there is a step in one's reasoning from experience that is not supported by any argument or process of understanding. Moving on to custom. The repetition of any particular act or operation produces a propensity to renew the same act or operation without being impelled by any reasoning or process of understanding. Without custom, Hume remarks reasoning that concerns matters of fact could not extend beyond memory and present sense experience. All inferences from experience, therefore, are effects of custom, not of reasoning. Custom, then, is the great guide of human life. It is that principle alone which renders our experience useful to us and make us expect, for the future, a similar train of events with those which have appeared in the past. Without the influence of custom, we should be entirely ignorant of every matter of fact beyond what is immediately present to memory and senses. We should never know how to adjust means to ends, or to employ our natural powers in the production of any effect. There will be an end at once of all action, as well as of the chief part of speculation. And lastly, imagination. Man's imagination has the unlimited power of mixing, compounding, separating, and dividing ideas in all the varieties of fiction and belief. It can feign a train of events, with all the appearances of reality, ascribe to them in a particular time and place, conceive them as existent, and paint them out itself in every circumstance that belongs to any historical fact which it believes with the greatest certainty. Imagination is divided into two parts, which are fiction and belief. Let's first focus on fiction. Fiction is the product of pure imagination by means conjuring all sorts of strange images derived from our simple impressions, such as unicorns, alien civilizations, and what have you. On the other hand, belief is a combination of imagination and a certain sentiment that we cannot control that suggests us to our imaginings correspond with reality. When some memory or sense impression is present to our minds, the force of custom will then carry the imagination to think of something to which the impression is constantly conjoined. This force of custom forms our beliefs and creates a more vivid, forceful, and firm version of our pure imaginings. The imagination has the command over all its ideas and can join and mix them, vary them in all ways possible. It may conceive fictitious objects with all the circumstances of place and time. It may set them in a manner before our eyes in their true colors, just as they might have existed. But as it is possible this faculty of imagination can never, of itself, reach belief, it is evident that belief consists not in the peculiar nature or order of ideas, but in the manner of their conception and in their feeling to the mind. Therefore, imagination has the command over all its ideas and can join and mix and vary them in all the ways possible.
On the seventh section of the book, entitled Of the Idea of Necessary Connection, Hume suggests that no idea in metaphysics is more obscure and uncertain than what is variously termed force, power, energy, or necessary connections. All ideas and complex impressions are initially formed by simple impressions which are vivid, sensible, and ambiguous. For example, for a complex idea like causation to have any meaning, humans must be able to trace it from the simple impression from whence it is derived. There is no simple impression that could inform us of necessary connection. He examines in turn humans' expressions of interactions and argues that in each case, humans do not perceive by experiment or reason any secret power of necessary connection. The body-body interaction, human cannot observe the act of causation, nor does the mind perceive the workings of a cause and effect. The mind-body interaction, on the other hand, humans are aware of our abilities to move their body. They are no means aware of the connection between the act of volition and the bodily movement. And lastly, the mind-to-mind interaction. Humans focus on their mind or produce ideas and fails to locate any necessary connections. Humans are incapable of apprehending any kind of necessary connections between events. Events may appear conjoined, but never connected. And because there is no simple impression related to necessary connection, it would seem that the term is meaningless, both in philosophy and in common life. Moving on to the necessary connection and constant conjunction. When people say that two events are connected, It is simply mean that they have acquired a connection in their minds. According to Hume, humans can perceive only constant conjunction between two events and not necessary connection. Let us first focus on the constant conjunction. It is the observation that two events seems to go together quite frequently. On the other hand, necessary connections is the perception of some connection between the two events that explains why they go together.
A key principle in Hume's system is that ideas are based on simple impressions. In other words, all of our inner world is ultimately derived from simple sense experiences and basic feelings of pain and pleasure. Most importantly, Hume taught us that complex ideas should be viewed with skepticism, because while we can explain the information, we cannot prove reality. Cheers for reaching the end of our recorded video presentation about David Hume's An Enquiry Concerning Human Understanding. I'm Franz Vian Enriquez, together with Neil Gala. Thank you for listening, and have a productive day ahead.